Millions of people around the world cried when we told the story of Dorothy Johnson, the 81-year-old nanny that Steph Curry discovered working as a dawn cleaner, cleaning offices with arthritic hands to survive. His action of completely transforming her life touched hearts on every continent, breaking viewership records and inspiring thousands of people to reconnect with forgotten mentors from their own lives. But today, for the first time since her story went viral, Dorothy Johnson is going to break her silence. And what she will reveal about that dawn morning, about Steph Curry as a child, and about how she really feels regarding all this transformation, will touch your heart in a way you never imagined. It's 6:30 in the morning, and Dorothy Johnson, now 83 years old, has just arrived at the Curry house in Atherton, California, coming from her own elegant residence just 2 blocks away. As the official Grandma Dorothy of the boys, she chose to start. Another day helping Cannon and Ryan with breakfast, preparing homemade pancakes with the same meticulous dedication that always characterized her love for children. The aroma mixes with the soft sound of the boys preparing for school, creating a domestic symphony that Dorothy never imagined she would experience again by pure choice and love. Can you perceive that there are life's twists that seem impossible until they happen, transforming nightmares into dreams and proving that some stories are too important to end in tragedy? "Grandma Dorothy," Cannon says while sitting at the table, using the affectionate title he adopted naturally, "can you tell again about when Daddy was little like me?" Dorothy smiles, her hands, the same ones that once held cleaning products with arthritic pain, now gently serving small pancake squares cut with loving precision. "Your father was exactly like you," she responds, always curious, always asking questions, always wanting to understand how things worked. But there's something different in Dorothy's voice this morning. A reflective quality that wasn't present in the last 2 years since Steph found her in that office in Charlotte. It's as if she were finally ready to share truths she had kept for decades, not just about Steph, but about her own journey through years that tested every fiber of her emotional resistance. "Ryan," Dorothy calls to the younger son, "come have breakfast, and bring that notebook where you write your questions." About stories, what's most impressive is how truly wise people manage to transform even the most common mornings into opportunities to plant seeds of values that will grow for generations. During the last 2 years, since Steph transformed her life so publicly and dramatically, Dorothy Johnson had become much more than a respected figure or a celebrity charity beneficiary. She had become the official Grandma Dorothy of the Curry family, not as an employee, but as a chosen honorary matriarch, the guardian of memories and values that connected Steph's glorious present to the fundamental lessons that shaped his character when he was just a 6-year-old boy trying to understand the world. But during all this time, while the world celebrated Steph's generosity and was moved by the reconnection story, Dorothy had silently carried details she never shared: intimate moments, private conversations, truths about that dawn that changed everything, and revelations about Steph as a child that she felt the world deserved to know. "Grandma Dorothy," Ryan asks while chewing his pancake, "why do you look different today? Like you're thinking about something very important?" Dorothy paused, looking at the 2 boys who had become as precious to her as Steph had been decades before. Cannon, at 13 years old, had the same intense curiosity that Steph demonstrated at the same age. Ryan, at 11 years old, possessed an emotional sensitivity that constantly reminded her of the generous heart she had helped form in their father. How is it possible that certain questions from children have the power to make us realize that the moment has come to share truths we've been keeping for too long? "You know," Dorothy said, sitting at the table with a gentle seriousness that immediately captured the boys' total attention. That the story everyone knows about me and your father isn't the complete story. Cannon and Ryan looked at each other with that excitement children feel when they realize they're about to discover important secrets. "What do you mean, Grandma Dorothy?" Cannon asked. "I mean," Dorothy responded, her hands unconsciously caressing the wooden crucifix she still wore around her neck, the same one she had given to Steph when he was 11 years old and that he had returned to her during that emotional meeting in the office, "that there are things about that night when your father found me, about how I felt, about what we really talked about, that I never told anyone." The silence that followed was charged with pure anticipation. "Things about when Daddy was little too?" Ryan asked, his eyes lighting up. "Especially about when your father was little," Dorothy confirmed. "Stories about fears he had, dreams he shared with me, moments when he needed comfort and guidance in ways he never spoke about publicly." It's impossible not to feel a thrill of emotion when we realize we're about to discover intimate truths about people we admire, especially when these truths come from someone who knew them in their most vulnerable and formative moments. Dorothy got up from the table and walked to the window that overlooked the garden, where Steph frequently played with the children. The California morning was perfectly clear, but there was a reflective quality in the light that seemed to invite confidences. "Why didn't you ever tell these things before, Grandma Dorothy?" Cannon asked. Dorothy turned to face the boys, and for the first time in 2 years, there was a vulnerability on her face they had never seen. "Because," she said softly, "sometimes we keep stories until we're sure people are ready to hear them. And because some truths are so precious that we need to wait for the right moment to share them." During the following hour, while Cannon and Ryan prepared for school with quieter movements than usual, Dorothy remained in the kitchen, processing a decision that had been growing in her heart for months. She thought about Jennifer Walsh, Steph's assistant who had become a close friend, and frequently encouraged her to share more details of her story. She thought about Martha Williams, her best friend in Charlotte, who always said Dorothy had a responsibility to tell her complete version to inspire other people. Can you perceive that sometimes we reach points in our lives where we realize that our experiences don't belong only to us, but also to the world, that can be touched and transformed by our courage to share intimate truths? The decisive moment came when Steph arrived to pick up the boys to take them to school, a routine he maintained whenever possible, demonstrating the same values of presence and parental involvement that Dorothy had planted in him decades before. "Miss Dorothy," Steph said, using the respectful title he had never abandoned. "Are you okay? It looks like you have something on your mind." Dorothy looked at Steph. No longer the 6-year-old boy she had known, but a 35-year-old man who had become one of the most admired people in the world, still treating her with the same reverence and affection he demonstrated when he was a child. "Steph," she said, her voice carrying a determination he immediately recognized as the same she used when she was about to teach an important lesson. "It's time for me to tell the world the whole truth about our story." Steph stopped in the middle of reaching for his keys, his attention totally captured. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Dorothy responded, "that there are parts of our story, about you as a child, about that night when you found me, about how I really felt during all those years, that the world needs to hear. Not to promote myself or seek more attention, but because our complete story can touch hearts and inspire people in ways we haven't yet imagined. What's most impressive is how decisions to share authentic vulnerability often arise not from personal need, but from understanding that our experiences can serve purposes greater than ourselves. Steph approached Dorothy with the same reverence he always demonstrated when she was about to teach something important. "Miss Dorothy, are you sure? You don't need to share anything you don't want to. Your privacy is more important than any story." Dorothy smiled, the same patient and wise smile that Steph remembered from his childhood. "My dear boy," she said, "you taught me something important when you found me in that office. You showed me that sometimes we need to put pride aside and accept help. Now, I want to teach you something back." "What?" Steph asked. "That sometimes our responsibility isn't just to keep precious stories, but to share them when they can make a difference in other people's lives. And our story, Steph, our complete story, can help the world understand something important about love, family, and it never being too late to honor those who shaped us." How is it possible that a morning conversation in a kitchen can contain the power to transform personal stories into missions that touch the entire world? During the following minutes, while Steph processed Dorothy's proposal, she continued explaining her vision. "There are things about you as a child that people need to know to completely understand the extraordinary man you became. There are details about that night in the office that can inspire other people who are facing difficulties. And there are truths about what it's like to receive a second chance in life that can give hope to those who think it's too late for changes." Steph sat at the kitchen table, recognizing the seriousness of the moment. "Miss Dorothy, if you want to share more of our story, I completely support it. But I want to make sure you're doing this for the right reasons." "The reasons," Dorothy responded, "are the same ones that made me dedicate my life to teaching values to children. Some lessons are too important to remain kept in individual hearts. They need to be planted in as many hearts as possible. Naturally, this leads us to the moment when we understand that certain stories belong not only to the people who lived them, but to the world that can be transformed by their courage and authenticity. The truth about real love is that it always finds a way back. And sometimes that path goes through our willingness to share vulnerabilities that can illuminate paths for other people." Dorothy Johnson had made a decision that would change her life again, but this time by her own choice. She was ready to tell the world not just about that dawn that reconnected her with Steph, but about decades of silent love, secret pride, and the complete journey of a woman who had dedicated her life to planting seeds of character in children, only to discover years later that those seeds had grown into trees that would offer shade and protection when she needed it most. The revelations Dorothy was about to share would go beyond anything the world had imagined about her story with Steph Curry. They would touch the essence of what it means to have chosen family, renewed purpose, and the transformative power of it never being too late for second chances when they're built on foundations of genuine love. 3 hours after the conversation that changed everything, Dorothy Johnson was sitting in her own living room, holding a cup of tea that was slowly cooling, while she finally prepared to open chests of memories she had kept locked for decades. Jennifer Walsh, Steph's assistant, who had become a close friend, was sitting across from her with a digital recorder, ready to capture truths that Dorothy knew needed to be preserved for posterity. "Jennifer," Dorothy said, her voice carrying the weight of years of carefully guarded silence, "what I'm going to tell you today will change how the world sees not just that night in the office, but who Steph really was as a child. There are secrets only I know, fears only I consoled, dreams only I heard." Jennifer adjusted the recorder and leaned forward, intuitively understanding that she was about to witness historical revelations. "Dorothy, I'm sure the world is ready to hear your complete version. Can you perceive that there are moments in life where we finally understand that our most intimate experiences can serve greater purposes, touching hearts and inspiring lives in ways we never imagined possible? Dorothy took a deep breath and began with the revelation she had kept the longest. Steph wasn't the confident boy everyone imagines. When he arrived at our house at 6 years old, he was afraid of the dark. Every night, after Dell and Sonia thought he was sleeping, he would get out of bed and come to my room. "Afraid of the dark?" Jennifer asked, surprised. "It wasn't common fear," Dorothy clarified. "It was something deeper. Steph told me, whispering as if it were the world's biggest secret, that he was afraid that important people in his life would disappear when he wasn't looking. Dell's work required so many trips that Steph had developed abandonment anxiety." Dorothy paused, vividly remembering nights when a little boy in striped pajamas appeared at her bedroom door, holding a worn teddy bear. "Miss Dorothy," he would whisper, "can you check if Mommy and Daddy are still here?" And I would get up, take his little hand, and we would walk together through the house hallways, him checking that his parents were safe in their rooms. What's most impressive is how discovering secret vulnerabilities of people we admire can make us love them even more deeply, understanding that greatness often arises from overcoming very human fears. "But there was something more," Dorothy continued, "something that explains a lot about Steph's personality today. He had an obsession with justice. If he saw other children being treated unequally, he became genuinely disturbed. Once, when he was 8 years old, he came home crying because he saw a boy at school being bullied. "Miss Dorothy," he said that day, "why are some people cruel to others? Why can't we all be kind?" And I understood in that moment that Steph wasn't just a sensitive child. He had an innate compassion that needed to be directed and cultivated. Dorothy got up and walked to a bookshelf where she kept some old photos. I have photos I never showed anyone. Steph at 7 years old teaching Seth to tie shoes. Steph at 9 years old consoling a neighbor girl who had lost her dog. He was always a natural protector. "Did he protect you too?" Jennifer asked. Dorothy smiled with deep tenderness. "In ways he didn't even realize. When I was tired after long days, Steph would come to me and say, 'Miss Dorothy, do you want me to help you with something? Can I do anything to make you feel better?' At 8 years old, that boy already demonstrated more emotional consideration than many adults. How is it possible that certain children are born with an intuitive capacity to perceive others' emotional needs and respond with generosity that transcends their own age and experience?" "But Jennifer," Dorothy said, her voice becoming softer, "what I'm going to tell you now, I never told anyone, not even Steph. It's about the dreams he shared with me when he couldn't sleep." Jennifer remained in total silence, understanding she was about to hear something extraordinary. "Steph used to tell me he dreamed of becoming famous, not to be rich or admired, but to use that fame to help people. At 7 years old, he told me, 'Miss Dorothy, when I grow up and become famous playing basketball, I'm going to build houses for people who don't have anywhere to live. And I'm going to visit sick children in the hospital and make them laugh.'" Tears began to form in Dorothy's eyes. He was 7 years old, Jennifer. 7 years old, and he was already dreaming of using any future success to serve others. It's no coincidence that he became exactly the kind of man he always dreamed of being. During the following hour, Dorothy shared dozens of memories that painted an intimate portrait of Steph as a child. His insatiable curiosity about why some families had fewer resources than others, his tendency to give his favorite toys to children who visited his house, his genuine concern when Dorothy had headaches or difficult days. He was special in a way that went far beyond athletic talent, Dorothy reflected. Steph had, and still has, a rare capacity to see other people's emotional needs and respond with genuine action. It's impossible not to feel deep admiration when we understand that certain people demonstrate from very early on character qualities that destine them not just for success, but for moral greatness that touches lives for generations. "Now," Dorothy said, her expression becoming more serious, "I need to tell the truth about that night in the office, about how I really felt when I saw Steph standing in that doorway at 2 o'clock in the morning." Jennifer leaned even further forward, knowing she was about to hear the emotional heart of the most viral story of recent years. "When I saw Steph in that doorway," Dorothy began, her voice choked, "my first feeling wasn't joy or surprise. It was deep shame. Shame that the boy I had taught about dignity and pride saw me in a situation that seemed to contradict everything I had tried to model for him." "Shame?" Jennifer asked gently. "Jennifer, you need to understand. I had taught Steph that honest work is always dignified, that there's no degrading work when done with integrity. But in that moment, seeing the expression on his face, I felt as if I had failed not just myself, but the values I had tried to instill in him." Dorothy paused, reliving emotions she had carried in silence for 2 years. "But then," she continued, "I saw something on Steph's face that completely broke me. It wasn't pity or condescension. It was genuine pain. Pain from someone who had just discovered that a loved person had suffered while he lived in abundance. What's most impressive is how true moments of emotional reconnection often begin not with joy, but with shared vulnerability that allows authentic love to transcend circumstances and lost time." "Miss Dorothy," he said, and his voice was breaking exactly like when he was a child and had gotten hurt. "Why didn't you look for me? Why did you let this happen?" And in that moment, I understood that my pride had deprived not only me of help, but had deprived Steph of the opportunity to express gratitude. Dorothy got up and walked to the window, observing the garden where she frequently saw Steph playing with Cannon and Ryan. "Jennifer," she said, "during all those years working alone, cleaning offices at dawn, I watched Steph on television, whenever possible. And every time commentators talked about his character, his leadership, his respectful way of treating all people, I would whisper to myself, 'I helped form this man.'" "You must have felt a lot of pride," Jennifer observed. "Pride mixed with pain," Dorothy corrected. "Because although I knew I had contributed to forming the extraordinary man Steph had become, I also knew I was missing the opportunity to witness his greatness up close, to continue learning from him the same way he had learned from me. How is it possible that genuine love can exist simultaneously with the pain of separation, creating a complex form of affection that celebrates someone's growth while lamenting the distance that growth sometimes creates?" "But there was a specific moment," Dorothy said, "that broke my resistance and made me realize that maybe Steph deserved to know where I was." "When was that?" Jennifer asked. "It was during the 2022 playoffs, when Steph was leading the Warriors back to the championship after difficult years. I was watching alone in my small living room, and during a post-game interview, a reporter asked Steph about his motivation to continue playing at a high level at 34 years old. Dorothy paused, remembering exactly the words she had heard. Steph responded, I play for all the people who believed in me when I was just a child with big dreams, especially those who taught me that character is more important than talent. I wish all of them knew that I never forgot their lessons. And Jennifer, when I heard that, I knew he was talking about me too. It's impossible not to feel deep emotion when we realize that people we love carry our influence in their hearts even when physical distance separates us, and that sometimes they express gratitude publicly, hoping it will somehow reach us. That night, Dorothy continued, for the first time in years, I seriously considered looking for Steph. Not to ask for help, but so he would know I was well, that I was proud of him, that the lessons we had shared continued alive in his actions. Why didn't you do it? Jennifer asked. Because, Dorothy responded with painful honesty, I still wasn't ready for him to see me as a person who needed help. My pride was protecting not only my dignity, but also the image I wanted Steph to maintain of me as someone strong and independent. Dorothy returned to her chair, holding again the cup of tea that had cooled completely. Jennifer, when Steph appeared in that office, he wasn't just saving my financial situation or offering a better house. He was offering me something I didn't know I had lost, the chance to continue being important in his life, to continue contributing to his journey in ways that went beyond what I had done in the past. Can you perceive that sometimes the most precious gifts aren't material things, but renewed opportunities for purpose and connection that allow us to continue growing and contributing even at advanced ages? And the truth, Dorothy said, her voice carrying renewed determination, is that these 2 years living near Steph and his family weren't just about receiving care and comfort. They were about discovering that I still have much to offer, that my experience and wisdom can still make a difference in forming Cannon, Ryan, and Kai's. How so? Jennifer asked. That 6-year-old boy who used to be afraid of the dark grew up and became a man who illuminates the entire world, Dorothy explained. But his children need the same fundamental lessons about character, compassion, and responsibility that I taught him. And Steph had the wisdom to recognize that some lessons are better transmitted by people who have already walked long paths in life. The truth about real love is that it always finds a way back. And sometimes that path leads us not just back to what we lost, but forward, toward new purposes that honor the past while creating even more meaningful futures. Dorothy looked directly at Jennifer, her eyes shining with a determination that had grown throughout that entire conversation. That's why, she said, I'm ready to tell the whole truth to the world. Not just about that night in the office, but about the entire journey. Steph's childhood fears, the dreams he shared, the years I spent alone but proud, and how I discovered it's never too late for second chances when they're built on genuine love. And there's one more thing, Dorothy added with a mysterious smile, that not even Steph knows about that night. Something that can change how the entire world sees our story. Naturally, this leads us to the moment when we understand that some stories have layers of truth that are only revealed when the person who lived them is finally ready to share even the most intimate secrets they kept out of love and protection. Jennifer turned off the recorder 2 hours later, knowing she had captured something extraordinary. Not just revelations about one of the world's most admired people, but a complete emotional journey of a woman who had dedicated her life to planting seeds of character, only to discover decades later that those seeds had grown into trees that would offer shade and protection exactly when she needed it most. Dorothy's most impactful revelations, however, were still to come. The secret she had mentioned, something not even Steph knew about that night, was about to transform an already powerful story into something that would touch the world in completely unexpected ways. Dorothy Johnson remained silent for several minutes after Jennifer turned off the recorder, her fingers drumming nervously on the table as if she were making a final decision about sharing truths she had kept, not just from the world, but even from Steph. The weight of 2 years of secrets was about to be released, and Dorothy knew that once certain words were said, there would be no way to undo them. "Jennifer," Dorothy finally said, her voice carrying a different quality, more intense, more vulnerable. "What I'm going to tell you now will shock even you. It's about that night in the office, but not just about how I felt when I saw Steph. It's about something that happened before he arrived." Jennifer quickly turned the recorder back on, her journalistic instincts detecting she was about to witness a historical revelation. "Before he arrived?" Jennifer asked, confused. "What do you mean?" Dorothy took a deep breath, preparing to reveal a secret she had carried alone for 2 years. "Jennifer, Steph wasn't the first famous person to find me in that office. Can you perceive that there are moments in life where a single sentence has the power to completely rewrite our understanding of events we thought we knew perfectly?" "What do you mean?" Jennifer asked, her voice barely disguising shock. 3 months before Steph appeared, Dorothy revealed, Robert Kim, you remember him, the assistant coach who used to work with Del Curry, found me first. The silence that followed was deafening. Robert had been looking for me for years at Del's request. He finally tracked me down through the same video that Kevin Torres posted. But Robert had seen it 3 months before it went viral. He came to the office one night, exactly like Steph did later. Jennifer was completely stupefied. "And what happened?" "Robert offered immediate help," Dorothy continued, her hands trembling slightly. "Said that Del and Sonia were desperate to find me, that Steph had asked about me several times over the years. He offered money, house, anything I needed." "And you refused," Jennifer said, more as a statement than a question. "I refused. Completely," Dorothy confirmed. "I told Robert I didn't want the Curry family to feel obligated to take care of me, that I was fine, that I could take care of myself. What's most impressive is how pride can blind us to opportunities for reconnection, making us choose solitary suffering instead of accepting love, genuinely offered by people who care about us." "But Dorothy," Jennifer said gently, "why are you telling me this now? Why keep this secret for so long?" Dorothy got up and walked to a drawer from which she removed a yellowed envelope. "Because there's more. Robert didn't just offer me help, he gave me a letter." "A letter from whom?" "From Steph," Dorothy responded, her voice breaking. "A letter Steph had written to me years before, but never had my address to send." Jennifer felt her heart accelerate when Dorothy carefully opened the envelope and removed 2 pages of paper with Steph's handwriting. "Jennifer," Dorothy said, tears already running down her face, "I'm going to read to you what Steph wrote to me in 2018, 4 years before finding me in that office. How is it possible that a letter written in the past can have the power to completely recontextualize future events, revealing layers of love and longing that were hidden beneath apparent coincidences?" Dorothy cleared her throat and began reading with a choked voice. "Dear Miss Dorothy, I know I'll probably never be able to find you to deliver this letter, but I need to write these words even if you never read them. Not a day goes by without me thinking about you and wondering how you are, where you are, if you're well. You taught me that greatness comes from character, not talent. And that phrase echoes in my mind every time I face difficult decisions." Dorothy paused, overcome by emotion. "I would like you to know that everything good I became, as a husband, as a father, as a person who tries to use his platform to help others, began with the lessons you taught me when I was 6 years old. You weren't just my nanny, Miss Dorothy. You were my first teacher about how to be a man of character." Jennifer was crying openly now, understanding the emotional magnitude of what she was hearing. "But the part that completely broke me," Dorothy continued, "was the end of the letter." She took a deep breath before continuing to read. "Miss Dorothy, if you ever need anything, please look for me. Not as charity, but as family. You helped me when I was a vulnerable child. Let me return that love now that I'm a capable man. You deserve to live your golden years with dignity and comfort, and it would be the greatest honor of my life to be able to provide that for you. With all love and gratitude, Steph." It's impossible not to feel your heart break when we realize that sometimes the people we love most are looking for us with the same intensity that we are avoiding being found, creating unnecessary tragedies based on pride and misunderstandings. "Dorothy," Jennifer said through sobs, "you read that letter in 2018 and still didn't look for Steph." "Not only did I not look for him," Dorothy revealed, "I asked Robert to promise he would never tell Steph he had found me. I said that if Steph really wanted to find me, destiny would make it happen naturally." "Why?" Jennifer asked, genuinely confused. "Because," Dorothy explained, "after reading that letter, I understood that Steph wasn't just offering help out of obligation or casual licks. Gratitude. He was offering genuine love, true family. And I didn't feel worthy of receiving something so precious." Dorothy returned to her chair, holding the letter as if it were a sacred treasure. "Jennifer, during all those years cleaning offices, I carried that letter in my purse. Every night, during my breaks, I would reread it and cry, not from sadness, but from a complex mixture of love, pride, and shame that I didn't know how to process. Can you perceive that sometimes love so deep can intimidate us so much that we prefer to carry its absence as a sweet burden rather than risk not being worthy of its presence in our lives?" "So when Steph appeared in that office," Dorothy continued, "it wasn't a total coincidence. I had been praying for months to have the courage to look for him, to accept the love he had offered me in that letter. And when you saw him standing in the doorway, my first thought was, finally, God answered my prayers in a way that didn't require me to swallow. My pride," Dorothy admitted with brutal honesty, "but then came the overwhelming shame that he saw me in those circumstances." Dorothy got up again and walked to the window, observing the garden where Steph frequently played with his children. "Jennifer, what I'm going to tell you now is the most difficult part of this entire story. When Steph offered me help that night, my first response was no." "You said no?" Jennifer asked, shocked. "I said no several times," Dorothy confirmed. "Even after reading that letter years before, even knowing he was offering me genuine love, my pride was still stronger than my need." Dorothy paused, reliving the most important conversation of her life. "Miss Dorothy," Steph said that night, "you taught me that accepting help when we need it isn't weakness, it's wisdom. Please, let me practice what you taught me." And it was only when he used my own lessons against me that I finally began to consider his offer. What's most impressive is how sometimes the people we love most need to use our own wisdom to convince us to accept the love they deserve to give us, breaking barriers we built not from lack of affection, but from excess humility. But there was still resistance, Dorothy continued. I said, Steph, you have your own family, your own responsibilities. I did my job raising you. You don't need to feel obligated to take care of me now. And what did he respond? Dorothy smiled through tears. He said something that completely broke me. Miss Dorothy, you don't understand. I'm not offering this out of obligation. I'm offering it out of necessity. I need you to accept, because taking care of you is one of the most important ways I have to honor everything you taught me about family, gratitude, and responsibility. Jennifer was completely absorbed in the story, understanding she was witnessing revelations that recontextualized the entire viral narrative. It was then, Dorothy said, that I finally understood that my refusal wasn't just protecting my pride. It was depriving Steph of the opportunity to express love and gratitude in a tangible way. I was denying him the chance to become the kind of man I had helped form. How is it possible that sometimes our efforts not to be burdens to people we love end up becoming even greater burdens by denying them the chance to demonstrate the love they feel for us? Jennifer, Dorothy said, turning to face her directly. There's one more thing I never told anyone, not even Steph. What? During all those years working alone, I wasn't just surviving. I was saving money. Jennifer frowned, confused. Saving for what? To leave an inheritance for Steph, Dorothy revealed. Every penny I could save after paying my basic expenses, I kept. I had more than $50,000 saved. Money I planned to leave for him as a final gift, a final lesson about hard work and sacrifice. The revelation was so unexpected that Jennifer was temporarily speechless. You saved $50,000 working as a cleaner? Jennifer finally asked. For 11 years, living with the absolute minimum, saving even pennies, Dorothy confirmed. Because even when I was struggling to survive, my love for Steph was stronger than my need for personal comfort. It's impossible not to feel absolute reverence when we understand that true love manifests not only in moments of abundance, but especially through silent sacrifices made in circumstances of scarcity. Dorothy, Jennifer said, her voice full of admiration, This is extraordinary. Does Steph know this? No, Dorothy responded. And that's one of the reasons I'm telling the whole truth now. I want the world to know that our story isn't just about a rich athlete saving a needy elderly lady. It's about mutual love that persisted through decades of separation, about two people who never stopped caring for each other, even when pride and circumstances kept them apart. Dorothy returned to the table where Jennifer was sitting, still holding Steph's letter. Jennifer, when Steph offered me a new life that night in the office, he wasn't just changing my financial situation. He was offering me the chance to transform years of silent love into years of active connection. And I was offering him the same thing, the chance to transform abstract gratitude into concrete care. Can you perceive that the best love stories, romantic, familial, or chosen heart, aren't about perfect people making grand gestures, but about imperfect people consistently choosing to put each other's well-being above their own pride and comfort? The truth about real love, Dorothy said, repeating her evolving phrase with deeper meaning, is that it always finds a way back. But sometimes that path requires both people to put aside not just hurts, but also excessive pride that prevents them from receiving and giving love to the extent they deserve. Dorothy looked directly at Jennifer with an intensity that had grown throughout the entire conversation. That's why I'm telling all this truth now, she said, because our story, the complete story, with all its layers of love, pride, sacrifice, and reconnection, can teach the world something important about never giving up on people we love, even when they seem to have disappeared from our lives. And about Steph? Jennifer asked. How are you going to tell him about the letter? About Robert? About the $50,000? Dorothy smiled with the same patient wisdom that had characterized her decades as an educator. I'm going to tell him exactly as I'm telling you, with total honesty, unconditional love, and the understanding that some truths become more precious when they're shared at the right time. The truth about real love is that it always finds a way back, and sometimes that path goes through our courage to reveal not just our moments of strength, but also our moments of vulnerability, fear, and imperfect humanity that makes our devotion even more meaningful. Naturally, this leads us to the moment when we understand that the most powerful stories aren't those that show us perfect people doing impossible things, but real people choosing love, sacrifice, and connection, even when it costs everything they have to give. Jennifer turned off the recorder for the second time that day, knowing she had captured not just revelations about a viral story, but universal truths about the nature of human love, pride, sacrifice, and the courage necessary to accept and offer authentic connection even when we feel unworthy of it. Dorothy's revelations had transformed an already powerful story into something transcendent, a lesson about how true love persists through any circumstance, finding ways to express itself even when pride and fear try to block it. But there was still one last layer of truth that Dorothy was ready to share, about how she feels today, living the life she never dared dream she could have again. 2 weeks. After the revelations that had left Jennifer Walsh emotionally exhausted and deeply inspired, Dorothy Johnson was sitting in her private garden in Atherton, watching Steph play basketball with Cannon and Ryan, while little Kays ran around trying to steal the ball. The sound of the ball bouncing on concrete, the same emotional anchor that had connected her painful past to her loving present, now echoed like a symphony of renewed purpose and reconstituted family. Steph interrupted the game when he saw Dorothy watching from the porch, approaching with that mixture of reverence and affection he always demonstrated when in her presence. "Miss Dorothy," he said, sitting next to her on the garden bench he had specially installed for these conversation moments, "Jennifer told me you had a very deep conversation about our story. She said you revealed things that not even I knew." Dorothy smiled, holding in her hands the yellowed envelope that contained the 2018 letter and a bank statement showing the $50,000 she had saved during years of solitary work. "Steph," she said softly, "it's time for you to know the whole truth about our journey. Not just the beautiful part the world saw, but also the difficult parts that involved pride, fear, and love so deep that sometimes it prevents us from making rational choices. Can you perceive that there are moments in life where we finally reach the point of having nothing left to hide, where our total vulnerability becomes the most precious gift we can offer to someone we love?" Steph leaned forward, giving Dorothy his complete attention in the same way he did when he was a 6-year-old child, waiting for an important lesson. "Miss Dorothy, you can tell me anything. There's nothing that can change the love and respect I feel for you." Dorothy took a deep breath and began with the most difficult revelation. "Steph, you weren't the first person to find me in that office." Steph's expression changed instantly. "What do you mean?" "Robert Kim found me 3 months before you did," Dorothy revealed, carefully observing Steph's reaction. "He had been looking for me for years, at your father's request. When he finally found me, he offered immediate help, said your family was desperate to locate me." Steph remained silent for several seconds, processing the information. And you refused. I refused completely, Dorothy confirmed. I said I didn't want you all to feel obligated, that I was fine taking care of myself. What's most impressive is how sometimes discovering that someone we love was suffering unnecessarily while refusing our help can be more painful than discovering they were suffering without our knowledge. Miss Dorothy, Steph said, his voice carrying complex emotion. Why didn't you accept Robert's help? Why did you wait until I showed up? Dorothy carefully opened the envelope and removed the letter. Because of this. She handed the 2 pages to Steph, watching as he recognized his own handwriting from 2018. Robert brought me this letter, Dorothy explained, while Steph read his own words with growing understanding. A letter you wrote to me 4 years before that night, looking for me, offering not just help, but true family. Steph finished reading the letter with tears running down his face. You had this for 2 years? During all this time, you knew I was looking for you? I knew, Dorothy admitted, and I carried your letter in my purse every day. I reread it during my work breaks, crying not from sadness, but from a mixture of love, pride, and fear I didn't know how to process. Steph carefully folded the letter, treating it like the treasure it had become. Miss Dorothy, why didn't you look for me after receiving this? Because, Dorothy responded with painful honesty, after reading your letter, I understood you weren't offering casual charity. You were offering genuine love, true family, and I didn't feel worthy of receiving something so precious. How is it possible that love so deep can intimidate us so much that we prefer to carry its absence as a sweet burden rather than risk not being worthy of its full presence in our lives? Steph leaned in and held Dorothy's hands, the same hands that once held cleaning products with arthritic pain, now soft and cared for thanks to the medical treatments he had provided. Miss Dorothy, he said, you were always worthy. Since I was 6 years old, you were always one of the most worthy people I knew. There's more, Dorothy said, removing the bank statement from the envelope. Steph, during all those years working alone, I wasn't just surviving. I was saving money for you. Steph looked at the document with growing confusion. $50,000? Miss Dorothy, how did you manage to save this working as living with the absolute minimum for 11 years? Dorothy interrupted. Every penny I could save after my basic expenses, I kept. I plan to leave this as an inheritance for you, a final lesson about hard work, sacrifice, and how much you always meant to me. Steph remained in absolute silence for several minutes, holding the bank statement as if it were a sacred document. Miss Dorothy, he finally said, his voice broken by emotion, you saved $50,000 for me, while you barely had money for your own needs? Because my love for you was stronger than my need for personal comfort, Dorothy responded simply. Even when I was struggling to survive, taking care of you, even from a distance, even through planning for the future, was still my priority. It's impossible not to feel absolute reverence when we understand that true love manifests not only in moments of abundance, but especially through silent sacrifices made in circumstances of absolute scarcity. Steph got up from the bench and began walking through the garden, clearly trying to process the emotional magnitude of what he had discovered. Miss Dorothy, he said, after several minutes. During all those years I thought I had lost contact with you, you were not only thinking about me, but actively sacrificing your own well-being to take care of me. And during all those years, Dorothy responded, you were not only remembering me, but actively looking for me and planning ways to take care of me. We were two people loving each other intensely through distance, both too proud to break the barriers we created. Steph returned to the bench and hugged Dorothy, not the respectful hug they normally exchanged, but the desperate embrace of someone who finally understands the total depth of love they received throughout a lifetime. "Miss Dorothy," he whispered, "thank you. Not just for saving that money, but for loving me so deeply that you were willing to sacrifice everything for me, even when I didn't know. Can you perceive that sometimes the most precious gifts aren't material things we receive, but the discovery that we were loved in ways we never knew? By people who made silent sacrifices we only discover when we already have the power to honor them adequately." "Steph," Dorothy said, "I want you to take that money and do something special with it. Not because I need you to use it, but because it will be my way of actively participating in something good you're going to create in the world." "What do you suggest?" Steph asked. Dorothy smiled with the same wisdom that had characterized decades of teaching. "Create a scholarship for children whose parents work in jobs that don't receive enough recognition. Cleaners, night security guards, people who do essential work but are often invisible. Call it the Dorothy Johnson Scholarship for Children of Invisible Heroes." The suggestion was so perfect, so characteristic of Dorothy's generosity, that Steph immediately knew it was exactly what he would do. "But there's something else I want to tell you," Dorothy continued, "about what my life is like now, about how I feel having this second chance I never thought I'd have." During the following hour, Dorothy shared intimate details about her current life that she hadn't revealed to anyone. "Steph, every day I wake up in my beautiful house, have my breakfast without hurry, and walk here to help with Cannon and Ryan, not because I need to work, but because I choose to love. It's a freedom I hadn't experienced in decades. What's most impressive is how a true second chance isn't just about improved material circumstances, but about recovering the ability to choose how we spend our time and energy based on love instead of survival necessity." "But you know what's most special?" Dorothy asked. "It's seeing your lessons, the lessons I planted in you when you were 6 years old, blooming in your children. Cannon has your same innate compassion. Ryan has your same curiosity about justice, and Kay's already demonstrates the same natural kindness you showed." Steph smiled, recognizing the generational continuity Dorothy had created. "Miss Dorothy, you didn't just teach me to be a good man. You're teaching my children to be good people. Your impact will continue through generations." "And that's exactly what," Dorothy said, "I want the world to understand about our story." Dorothy got up and walked to the garden's edge, looking at the mountain view she never imagined would be part of her daily life. "Jennifer is going to publish our complete conversation," she said, "and I want people to understand some important truths." "What truths?" Steph asked. "First," Dorothy began, "that our story isn't just about a rich athlete saving a needy elderly lady. It's about mutual love that persisted through decades, about two people who never stopped caring for each other even when pride and circumstances kept them separated. Second," she continued, "that it's never too late for second chances when they're built on foundations of genuine love. I'm 83 years old, and I'm living some of the happiest days of my life. Third, that sometimes the people we love most are looking for us with the same intensity we're avoiding being found. Pride can cost us years of unnecessarily lost connection. How is it possible that life's most important lessons often emerge not from easy successes, but from complex journeys through separation, pride, sacrifice, and eventual reconnection based on mature love. And fourth, Dorothy said, turning to Steph with the intensity he remembered from her most important childhood lessons, that true greatness doesn't come from talent or achievements, but from the consistent willingness to put others' well-being above our own pride and comfort. Steph approached Dorothy, understanding he was receiving one of the last great lessons she had to teach. "Miss Dorothy," he said, "your entire life has been an example of that truth. You put my well-being above your own pride when you finally accepted my help, and you put my well-being above your own comfort during all those years, saving money for me. And you," Dorothy responded, "put my well-being above any inconvenience when you looked for me, and above any financial cost when you transformed my life. We're a family that works because we both learned that true love requires action, not just feeling. Can you perceive that the best love stories, whether romantic, familial, or chosen heart, aren't about perfect people making grand gestures, but about imperfect people consistently choosing to put each other's well-being above selfish considerations?" At that moment, Cannon and Ryan ran to them, sweaty and happy after their basketball session. "Grandma Dorothy," Cannon said, "Daddy said you have new stories to tell about him when he was little." Dorothy smiled, looking at Steph with complicity. "I have many new stories. Stories about courage, about pride, about love that finds ways to persist even through years of separation. And stories," Steph added, "about how sometimes the most important people in our lives make sacrifices we only discover when we're old enough to appreciate them completely." During dinner that night, with the entire Curry family gathered around the table Dorothy had helped prepare, she felt filled with a sense of complete purpose she had searched for throughout her life. Isha, who had become like a daughter to Dorothy, asked, "Dorothy, after telling your whole story to the world, how do you feel?" Dorothy paused, carefully considering her response. "I feel," she said, "finally, like someone who planted seeds throughout her life without knowing if she would ever see the trees that would grow. And now, at 83 years old, I'm not only seeing the trees, but living in the shade they provide, harvesting fruits that feed not only me, but a new generation. The truth about real love is that it always finds a way back, sometimes through years of separation and pride, sometimes through silent sacrifices and persistent searches, but always through our willingness to choose connection over ego protection, vulnerability over apparent invulnerability." 3 months later, when Dorothy's complete story was published, it went viral again, not just for its shocking revelations, but for its universal message about love, family, pride, and it never being too late for second chances. Michelle Carter, the journalist who had documented the original story, called Dorothy a week after publication. "Dorothy," she said, "your story is inspiring millions of people around the world. People are looking for lost mentors, pride is being set aside, families are reconnecting." "And the Dorothy Johnson Scholarship?" Dorothy asked. "Steph has already received more than $2 million in donations," Michelle responded. "Apparently, people around the world want to honor invisible heroes the same way Steph honored you." Dorothy smiled, understanding that her story had become much larger than her personal experience. It had become a catalyst for love, recognition, and connection on a global scale. It's impossible not to feel deep gratitude when we realize that sometimes our most difficult personal journeys transform into gifts for the world, inspiring others to choose love over pride, action over intention, and connection over ego protection. 1 year later, During Dorothy's 84th birthday, Steph organized a celebration that included not just the Curry family, but also Martha Williams, who had moved to California to be near her best, friend, Jennifer Walsh, Robert Kim, and dozens of other people whose lives had been touched by Dorothy's story. "Miss Dorothy," Steph said during his speech that night, "you taught me that greatness comes from character, not talent. But what I learned this year is that your own life was the greatest demonstration of that truth. You demonstrated greatness through decades of silent sacrifice, persistent love, and final courage to accept genuinely offered love." Dorothy stood to respond, looking around the room full of people who had become her chosen family. "What I learned," she said, "is that the best stories don't end with, 'and they lived happily ever after.' They continue with, 'and they kept choosing love every day, even when it was difficult, especially when it was difficult.' Our story isn't special because it had a happy ending. It's special because it shows that true love persists through any circumstance, finds ways to express itself even when pride tries to block it, and always, always, is worth the risk of vulnerability it requires." Can you perceive that the most powerful stories are those that don't just inspire us through their resolutions, but teach us through their journeys that love, in all its imperfect and complex forms, is always the choice worth making? The truth about real love is that it always finds a way back, not because it's easy or guaranteed, but because courageous people choose to create those paths through consistent action, brave vulnerability, and the understanding that some connections are too important to be lost to pride or fear. Dorothy Johnson had begun as a nanny who taught a child about character. She had become much more, a matriarch who demonstrated through her own life that it's never too late for second chances, that true love persists through decades of separation, and that sometimes the most precious gifts are those we give and receive when we finally have the courage to put love above pride. Her story with Steph Curry wasn't just about reconnection. It was living proof that when we plant seeds of character in young hearts, those seeds grow into trees that eventually offer protective shade exactly when we need it most. And sometimes, if we're very lucky and have enough courage to accept love when it finds its way back to us, we discover that the best stories aren't those that end, but those that continuously choose to begin again. One day of love at a time, one brave choice at a time, one authentic connection at a time.